do that.
Oh, no, I'm not ready to go. Put off for 30 minutes to start later.
I don't think so. All right, let's let folks in. Okay.
Hey, Joe. Good to see you.
Hey Chris, good to see you too.
Yeah, just thinking of you the other day. Hey, Robert, Sroof,
Hi,
Jerry.
welcome everybody.
Hey, Jerry.
Joseph, I haven't seen you since we worked together on the Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion Journal
I
special issue and all that.
yes, I know. So great to see you, Judy.
And Jerry Bieberman, who's here, is the founding editor of the JMSR Journal.
Thanks. I'm only going to be on for a half hour, but I wanted to see
Jerry
some.
will take what we can get.
Yeah.
And we have some Edgewalker facilitators on. I see Peggy O'Neill and Brian Gorman, and I know more are joining us. And, so today is, oh, let's let a couple more people in. Um, Today is March 12th, 2026, and our topic is spirituality and sustainability. And I got this brainstorm several months ago to reach out to three dear friends who are pioneers in bringing the topics of spirituality and sustainability to the field of management and leadership and organizational change. And I was thrilled when they each said yes. So I'm going to introduce them briefly. Each one of them is going to do a little presentation about some of the key ideas they want to share with you. Then 3 or 4 of us will chat among ourselves. We'll open it up for Q&A. We'll end with announcements, and that will be it for today. I'm Judi Neal. I'm the founder of Edgewalkers International, and we do a practice at the beginning of any Edgewalker Café. My favorite practice lately is to use this Edgewalker affirmation card deck. And Brian's smiling because he's got his card of the day. So we like to pull pull a card for setting the field of energy that we're going to be in our time together. So I'm just going to pull a card that seems to want to jump out. This is a card connecting. It has the definition of connecting on the back. The ability to value others, to see their uniqueness, and to draw out the best in them. And this is the actual affirmation side of the card. Ooh, we gotta let some people in. Sorry. Here we go. And this is always harder for me to read. Hold on 1 second. Okay. I am curious and interested in people who are seemingly different from me, and I enjoy reaching out to them. So we have a whole lot of people here who are interesting and unique and different. We celebrate and love each one of you. We're so glad you're here. Please feel free to put where you're from in the chat, and you might even want to say something about why you were drawn to this conversation on sustainability and spirituality. And so I want to introduce our three beloved guests. First of all, starting with Chris Laszlo. He's a professor of organizational behavior at Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. Also former chair of the Management, Spirituality, and Religion group. Several of us here are members of the Management, Spirituality, and Religion division of the Academy of Management. He's the author of many books. My favorite is Quantum Leadership, that he co-wrote with Fred Chow, and his Flourishing Enterprise, and lots of other books. He's just prolific, and prolific journal article writer. Secondly is Sandra Waddock, who's a Galligan Chair of Strategy and Professor of Management at Boston College. She has also written many books. My favorite is Catalyzing Transformation. which we use to guide us in our strategy development at the Global Consciousness Institute that Chris Laszlo is a part of. It's a brilliant book. Also wrote Intellectual Shamans and lots of other books and articles. Just a beloved and honored academic and teacher and shaman. And last but definitely not least is Jim Stoner, who I think is probably one of my oldest friends here today. Jim, knowing you back from Organizational Behavior Teaching Society and wonderful retreats and many nights of music as well. And Jim, I was first a little intimidated by Jim because he wrote the best-selling management textbook, and everybody used his textbook on management in their classes just kind of around the world. And what was unique was Jim was the first management textbook author to include topics on sustainability and to include topics on spirituality. And so these three pioneers have so much to share with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Great. Thank you, Judi, for the kind introduction. Let me say what a pleasure it is for me to be with you, Judi, with Jim Stoner and Sandra Waddock, three people who I've always admired and considered to be my friends and who have had an outsized influence on my work. I also want to say a special hello to everyone who's joining this webinar today. I see many friends and my brothers here. Hello, Alexander, Jim. I'm not sure I'm able to say hello to each and every one of you, Joe, but I appreciate your being here. Okay, I want to start by sharing my journey in sustainability and how that led me to spirituality as a high point of leverage for system change. As many of you know, I've been focused on corporate sustainability for over 2 decades. Along with others, I helped to bring into existence a no trade-off model called sustainable value. Instead of approaching sustainability from the standpoint of stopping firms from doing bad things, which was the prevailing approach in the 1990s, the no trade-off model stated that business could innovate their business models and product designs to be more sustainable and more profitable. This no trade-off model was central to my 2011 book with Nadia Zextembayeva, Embedded Sustainability, the Next Big Competitive Advantage. This was the analytic conceptual business case for sustainability. But around the time of the book's release, I had an epiphany. I should say a horrible epiphany, the kind of epiphany that no author wants to have, that book was somehow instantly obsolete, because the business case for sustainability, no matter how persuasive, would never compel business leaders to go beyond doing less harm. At best, the business case would help them focus on things like conserving energy, cutting waste, and other eco-efficiencies. Going further, to make a positive impact on society and the environment depends on who they are being, not on some conceptual business case. So I shifted my focus to transforming leaders at the individual levels instead of only the business case at the organizational level. This led me to my research on flourishing and quantum leadership. I found that changing who a person is being depends on practices in their life that give them an experience of wholeness and connectedness. Okay? I'm sure each of you have practice like this in your life. Practices such as meditation, art, music, nature immersion, exercise, and the more than 100 such practices mentioned in the Quantum Leadership book meet 3 criteria from inclusion. 3 criteria for inclusion. First of all, the practice leads to a spiral of positive emotions, which increases our sense of well-being and the ability to handle life's challenges. This draws on the work of Barbara Fredrickson, her broaden and build idea. Secondly, the practices expand our awareness of being one with the world. When you practice it enough, it helps us to get into a state of flow, where creativity and productivity emerge effortlessly. And here I'm drawing on Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's book from 1990 by the same name, Flow, same title, Flow. And third, the practices engage the whole person rather than only the analytic, rational self. And here, Richard Boyatzis and co-authors in 2014 spoke to this. So, guess what? This is fundamentally a spiritual experience for people. Here, by the way, I'm building on the work of Ian Mitroff and Elizabeth Denton in their empirical study published in 1999 in the MIT Sloan Management Review. They define spirituality as the basic feeling of being connected with one's complete self, others, and the entire universe. Judi, this is why the card you pulled today was the perfect card for it today. Connectedness. And the authors went on to say, if a single word best captures the meaning of spirituality and the vital role that it plays in people's lives, they wrote, that word is interconnectedness. I agree. Experience interconnectedness to self, others in the world, increases our awareness of how we impact others in the world. It elevates our consciousness from egocentric to global consciousness that is inclusive of others in the planet. This leads to more ethical behavior as bad decisions are caught earlier and as leaders become more aligned with societal expectations. And this is what I continue to explore, how spirituality and spiritual practices of all kinds are at the center of transforming business leaders who want to do well by doing good, not because of an analytic business case, but because of who they are. Okay? That's the main message I have to share this morning. And with that, over to you, Sandra.
So thanks, Chris. Well, you're inspiring me as we go along here. So I'll briefly talk about my own journey and some of the current framing. So first of all, we were talking in a meeting prior to this last week about, or maybe it was earlier this week actually, about somebody mentioned God, and I said I don't talk, as a lapsed Catholic with all the implications thereof, I don't usually talk about God. However, there was something vastly missing in my life as I was working on the business case for, that Chris mentioned, for doing better, doing well by doing good, with Sam Graves and many of our papers, but particularly the quote unquote famous 1997 paper that was the first paper to use the KLD database in a way that looked at social and financial performance. So I'm guilty of taking part in actually forwarding the argument for the business case, which I now realize won't get us anywhere near where we need to be. So I moved from sort of having no spiritual practice earlier in my career and being very much of a straight, strict, get it done kind of person, to realizing that something was really vastly missing in my life, in my practice, in my world. And I began reading. How I learn is reading. And I began reading about shamanism as a way of getting away from sort of having nothing that meant spirituality in my life, and read everything I could put my hands on about shamanism. But that was long before I would ever admit publicly that I was interested in something like shamanism. And I did meet Ian Mitroff and became friends with him and was very influenced by some of his thinking. But I was also influenced by Peter Senge and ideas about whole systems thinking. I would now say we need to retire the word sustainability, because if you think about the meaning of sustainability, and Chris's work is very much about this, it means to sustain what is. And the problems, the polycrisis that we face today is all based in trying to sustain what we are currently doing. And we can't do that. We have to shift to whole new ways of thinking, or actually I believe that they're embedded in indigenous ways of thinking. Eco-social framings, which puts the rest of nature before human, or at least as equally important as human nature, recognizing that we humans are deeply embedded in nature, and we can't, everything we have, do, eat, own, have in the world comes from nature, and we can't really avoid that, even though we think we can, and we think we can dominate over nature as a species. We see from the catastrophes that are happening around the world that that's just not possible. So I moved from a sort of a positivist orientation and a strict, I don't care about that stuff, to a much more open way of being. And Judi and I share a musical practice that I think is, one time, I'll just tell a little story about Judi and me. We were on a panel at the Academy of Management, and about 2 weeks later, we're standing in front of the porch at music camp, looking at each other going, don't I know you? How do I know you? And oh my God, totally different life. Here we are at this music camp. And so we have this musical practice and this other kind of practice going on at the same time. And it's the sort of light that comes from recognizing people that I want to talk about. So when I did the book Intellectual Shamans, I interviewed 28 of my favorite academics at the time. I have many more now. One of them was Jim Walsh. And one of the things Jim Walsh said is, I'm always attracted to people of light. And I thought, yes, that's exactly it. And who are these people of light? Well, today I would call them the shamans, the intellectual shamans. But I would also think that I had done an earlier book called The Difference Makers. When I think about the people I call difference makers, they have exactly the same characteristics that the shamans have. They have the same characteristics that Judi writes about when she talks about edgewalkers. And they have the same characteristics of the people today I call transformation catalysts, those people who are trying to build an eco-socially informed, regenerative approach to transformation. Why? Because these people are all healers, connectors, and sense makers, which are the three main characteristics of the shamans. So the healing orientation to make the world better. And this comes from the work of Peter, oh my goodness. It'll come back to me. Carolyn Egri and Peter Frost. This original framing, they talked about spiritual connectors, but healing the world, some sort of healing orientation, connecting, crossing boundaries. And Judi talks, that's what an edgewalker does, crosses boundaries. And why do you cross boundaries? You cross, the shaman in traditional cultures crosses boundaries to bring back spiritual information, to help the person who's sick, or to help the community that might be having some ills going on. And that's what all these boundary spanners do. And sense makers, and particularly as intellectual shamans, as academics, people of light, are making sense of the world for others. And my current way of making sense is to begin to frame what this eco-social, regenerative approach could look like. It's not based in sustaining what we currently have. It's based in what Chris calls flourishing, and what I call flourishing as well. So it's based in a whole different view of the world that actually sees humans and the rest of nature thriving together. And let me stop there and turn it over to Jim.
I'm going to thank you. I'm so glad this is recorded because I can follow things better without rehearsing what I'm going to say too much. I'm going to read some notes I made this morning about 5 o'clock in the morning or so, and start off with, but before I get there, by the way, I got Chris into my first spiritual type practice, which was meditation, when I was doing the first edition of the textbook Judi mentioned. And I was warned that although I had been standing up teaching an executive program leading for a number of years very actively, I was now going to have to sit down and write. And I was going crazy. I just could not stop. I took a leave of absence from teaching. I could not sit at a desk and write. I would get up and I have to go to the men's room. And 5 minutes later, I realized I needed a cup of coffee. And 5 minutes later, I need so-and-so. And it was so miserable. I was warned that I was going to go crazy doing it. And what I did was I started meditating. And I meditated the rest of my life. And it made such a difference and enabled me to get through it. So I really appreciate this opportunity, Judi and everybody else, because it gets me thinking. It got me thinking this morning. My topics, as usual for me, I have questions more than answers. Soren Kierkegaard has led me to see my life and work and teaching style as being grounded in questions more than answers. So what I'm going to have now is more questions, which seems to be who I am. First, Judi's question and things related to spirituality and sustainability that I'm searching for is what I'll talk about. First, Judi's first question was, how was I awakened to spirituality? Well, there were two things. One was 20 or 30 years ago, I was in the Dominican Republic for one of those thrilling experiences of my life. I had a room full of, an amphitheater full of students who had read one of my books and in Spanish, and were there because I was there for an hour or two or whatever. And I walked down the stage, towards the stage, with people standing up cheering. It never happened in my life before or after, and I loved it. And I felt so jealous of Johnny Carson and others who used to do that once a week. But during it, actually they read a different book also, as well as my textbook. The book that I was responding to in that particular talk was one where Charlie Wonka and I used the 7S model, strategy, structure, system, skills, etc., to define what managing for quality and productivity could really look like if we really did it right. And in that talk, a student raised his hand and said, Professor Stoner, what is the success? I had never thought of that. It had never occurred to me. And on the moment at the time, with the rector of the university in the front row on the right-hand side, about 6 seats over, I said, I think it's spirituality. And I then started thinking about what spirituality might mean in terms of business and management and my life and everything. And the second thing that happened was a bunch of people were telling me I was spiritual, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And so I finally, not too long after, taught my first class, as I do often, my advanced level seminar in the MBA program on spirituality, total quality management, and sustainability, and something or other, I forget what it was. And then the next time next year I taught spirituality and sustainability and quality management. I forgot the titles. I knew them 10 minutes ago, an hour ago. But the thing is, the seminars I taught were like what we did at MIT to some extent. My case was extreme. I had no syllabus for it. Or if I had a one-page syllabus, I tore it up in the first class. And the students and I spent the whole term exploring the connection between management and spirituality and whatever the other topic, and the sustainability. And it was just pure fun for me. And they loved it too. I got great teaching ratings on that thing also. But I started learning about spirituality by teaching it. So thank you, Judi, for pushing me in that direction. Currently, I got 3 or 4 points here. Currently, I'm looking for spirituality-inspired, grounded path to at least 2 of maybe 4 of the great challenges I see the 21st century. Judi talks about, Sandra talks about polycrises and many other, and I agree with that. That's where we're in. And Otto talks about the great divides, etc. One of the things that came up for me in a book, in a management, spirituality, and religion special issue that Chris and Fred Sal made happen, was a way of looking at the great challenges of the 21st century. And I'm very interested in transforming business education. And it seemed to me that spirituality, and I'm looking for how that can be more of an access to those things, are ways that we can deal with climate change, global unsustainability, ecological destruction, etc. The first challenge. The second one is avoiding nuclear Armageddon in that particular MSR issue. The third one is becoming the kind of people that can live on this planet without destroying it or can heal it. That's a natural, I think, for spirituality. And I want to find out how to go further with spirituality and dealing with that. And it's a great one for transforming business education. Another one is creating the kinds of products and services we need in ways that don't destroy the planet. And I think what Chris and others are doing in spirituality, there fit perfectly. And finally, the fifth one is transforming this Borg that controls us, this paradigm that Robert and Chris and Sandra wrote about so well in Torn Between Two Paradigms. So I'm grappling with, and I need help on how I can use the leverage of spirituality in transforming business education to meet some of those needs. Let's see, number 3, I want to explore and write about consumerism, the religion of global business practices, as being the opposite to 3,000 years of spiritual and indigenous wisdom about what the good life is. I think we know what the good life is, and consumerism tells us it's exactly the opposite to that. And the 4 I wrote down here, oh, by the way, I'm looking for a doctoral candidate who will do a thesis on yoga and global sustainability, flourishing, regeneration. To continue the theme of the muse who was headed that way and who died much too young a few years ago. So I think she was working towards a doctoral dissertation that would have integrated her work as a yoga teacher with sustainability. Then 5 down here, I got the last 2 to go. I have one give up on. I'm willing to admit I lost traction on my theme when I agreed to be a rejection alternative for the 5 steps involved in becoming chair of MSR years ago. We were an interest group then. Chris has brought it into being a division. Thanks, Chris. I thought I wasn't going to win because I didn't deserve to win, but it turned out that everybody else dropped out. So I got to be through the 5 chairs. Now,
Jim.
I didn't go for that to happen, but it happened.
Jim.
Yes.
I just want to remind you that when you stepped down as chair, you asked me to put myself forward as a candidate. And I said that I didn't want it. And you said, don't worry, you'll never get elected.
Did I say that? I am such a liar.
You did say that.
And you got us, you got us into a division. And Judi, you were a founder of MSR.
I was the second chair. I think we have 4 past chairs of MSR on this call today. Jerry Bieberman was the first chair. God bless you, Jerry.
Well, I ran on the platform, to the extent I ran, of having sustainability bring the various religions together because they had the same goal, and having the same goal bring them together. So I had spirituality and sustainability in there pretty strongly. And finally, I have one not enough time for, and all stimulated, thanks, Judi, by the fact I was going to talk today. I'd love to do a textbook to replace the current ones on management, a term I don't like anymore, and I'm having increasing trouble with. A textbook that dances between and perhaps yields a more than rather than an either or an even a better, a both and path that builds on planning, organizing, leading, controlling / hierarchical command and control management that we've studied and taught for 125 years almost now. And something that's grappling towards that we're labeling radically transparent co-creation. And maybe it really is jazz as a metaphor for getting things done in organizations, as in Frank Barrett's Yes to the Mess and Max Dupree's Leadership Jazz, a textbook that builds on the more than framing we got from Sophia Town, who got it from Harvard, I think. Many of us, last point, many of us have taught in management that either or is what we, by the way, is in the textbook, is how to solve either or problems. That really the answer is sometimes both and. But Sophia told us that actually she came out of Harvard's work with the possibility that we can go beyond both and, that we can get even further and accomplish a more than when we have these either or decisions facing us. So that's the book I'd like to do, and I'm all done. So thanks for giving me a chance to figure out what I thought for the moment.
So I'm curious if we want to speak, maybe people who are listening could put into the chat, and Jim and Chris could help me out here. How do you define, what do you mean by spirituality? Or Judi, too.
I think I came up spiritual with a definition listening to it about the Sloan Management Review article. It's just awareness of us, that I'm not an entity all by myself. I'm just part of a community that goes beyond probably what's on the planet right now and much further.
Yeah.
But most of all, spirituality for me gets me away from my ego, and my ego is not my friend.
And Chris?
Practices that connect me to my life purpose, connect me to others in high quality relationships, connect me to nature, and practices that connect me to the transcendent. This is the essence of the spiritual experience. And I tell my students, it's not at all an intellectual idea. Spirituality for me is not intellectual, it's practice-based. It's what I do in my life to be more or less connected to the world around me.
Yeah. It's exactly that sense of connectedness for me, too, actually, to self, other, the rest of nature, and our whole planet, and to the healing processes associated with that. So, yeah.
How about folks from the audience?
They're putting some things in the chat about their response to the question. Wow, there's a lot. So let's see. I think Robert was one of the first people to respond. Robert, do you want to speak your definition, and then Allison, and then Francesca?
Sure, I think it's already been touched upon by the others, but it's this connectedness to something beyond self. And all the way back to the origins of everything, right? To make it that vast. It's everything beyond the skin-bound self. And it's experienced by people in different ways. So I don't know if there's any one definition I want to point to. I'd rather it be fluid in my mind and my ebb and flow with that over time.
Thank you so much. Allison?
Robert just said it all. Yes, and
And then Francesca?
Hello. Yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts on the term spiritual intelligence. That's been coming up more, and as a way of knowing, as a human way of knowing. beyond the cognitive, like our connection, purpose, meaning.
Have you all seen Dan Brown's new book, The Secret of Secrets?
It's
really,
fantastic. It's amazing.
Yeah,
It,
I read it.
yeah, it needs to be a textbook for a course taught by the Global Consciousness Institute. It's just incredible. But it doesn't talk specifically about spiritual intelligence, but it does talk about the other ways of knowing beyond cognitive, as Francesca was just saying. And Francesca, I don't know if you're aware of the work of Cindy Wigglesworth, where she builds on Dan Goleman's emotional intelligence work. And I'm forgetting the name of the woman in the UK who's also done work on spiritual intelligence. It's important, and I'm glad you brought it up. And there are methods for helping people develop their spiritual intelligence further. And really, it's through practices, getting back to what each of our panelists have talked about.
Just if I could add to that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Go
Just
ahead.
to add, that's what I'm finding. I'm researching spiritual intelligence in education for sustainable development and asking people to define spiritual intelligence. And then another question is, and what is education for sustainable development? Is this what you're doing? And so many people are just saying, well, no, it's beyond sustainable. Sustaining what? And the practice-based dimension. So it's really resonating with the sharings so far today. I just want to say thank you for this space. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you
Yeah,
for being
Francesca,
here.
it seems like that's also
comment on
deeply.
the. Oh, sorry. Robert.
Sorry.
No, it
I
just
think it's deeply
occurred to me.
rooted in the Scandinavian education programs too, without having the word spirituality or intelligence being there, but instead being very experiential.
As a blinding flash of the obvious, it just occurred to me with Chris's emphasis on practices that Chris has been a runner for a long time, a serious runner, and I was a pretty mediocre runner regularly, and I realized that was one of my major spiritual practices.
I would say, I mean, Judi might have something to say about this too. For me, music and playing music with others is part of my spiritual practice. But
Yes.
I've also been in a group for 25 years, a shamanic group. And, we don't do anything particularly ritualistic or fancy. We just try to connect.
I think this is a very important point, Francesco. So, that for some people like Jim and me, it was running. For others like Judi and Sandra, it was music. But there are literally dozens and dozens of different practices that work for people. And the trick is to let them discover what works for them, not to push a particular practice on somebody. That doesn't work. It's an invitation to discover.
And Chris, you talked about meditation earlier, and I'm not great at meditating, but I will say that in starting a shamanic practice, that was a meditative practice as well. And so, because it helped me anyway, to access parts of me that I was denying for
Yes.
so many years and I was pushing down. And,
Yeah, so that worked for you. Yeah. Good.
When I started meditating, the most helpful thing that happened was I came across an article, I think maybe on meditators in Germany, but European meditators, that said that about half the time people were asleep. And that made meditation so unthreatening and so comfortable for me that it was really.
I'm wondering if anyone in the listening audience might have any questions or insights they'd like to share.
Just a point of discussion in some of my classes right now, MBA classes, talking about well-being in organizations and practice of connectedness, going very much on what Chris was talking about. We're having a discussion about whether organized organize activities in a company, in an organization, whether those are beneficial or not, or whether our emphasis should be on personal practices, individual practices, which lead to more of a sense of caring for individual managers. And we talk about this and debate it a little bit, and what's coming out is that there tends to be, at least among my students, a perception that organized practices, having companies, provide meditation classes or yoga, different things that can be done, are great if they can be provided, but should never be mandatory. Should never be something that everybody should be. You will show up at 2 p.m. and participate in our meditation class today, and it's pretty strong.
Yeah, definitely. I found the same thing, Joe.
But offering it seems to be
Yes.
Very, very strongly supported.
Invitation.
The invitation, not the requirement. Yes.
Right.
I do find that whenever I go to a place that has a meditation room it really feels good to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Judi, remember Mr. May and his leadership in bringing spirituality in this company?
I totally remember touring his plant and the silence room. That's what he called it. He didn't even want to call it meditation because he thought that might be too threatening to some people. And so he called it the silence room. And he said it was even okay for people to go in there and sleep, getting back to sleep and meditation. It was whatever renewed their body, mind, and spirit. If they needed time to do that, anybody in the plant could go there as long as their work was covered on the floor. Yeah, and one of the things I've been studying for years is what are the organizational practices that support connectedness, consciousness, flourishing, an awareness of sustainability. One of my favorite is an organization. It was the Weather Information Services in New Zealand, and the CEO took people on advances. He said, "We're not retreating, we are advancing," and he would give them spiritual things to read or listen to before they would go to this advance in nature. And they spent a lot of time in nature. And there's something about being in nature that shifts consciousness. And so many people in business are in glass, steel, and cement buildings all the time. I remember reading a book by a priest that he had a little essay in the beginning of his book that said, "I never trust a leader who won't sit on the earth." So there's, very interesting things. We can give people a chance to go sit on the earth, except in Arkansas where you'll get bit by chiggers. So, yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other organizational practices people are aware of, or anything else that you want to ask any of our panelists or share with them. We have really about 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to do just some updates on other things we've got going on in Edgewalkers, and then we'll close out. But let's keep this discussion going. Let me see if there's anything that I've missed in the chat. Alexander, you had something. I didn't get a chance to read it, but would you like to share?
Sorry, it was a bit long there. Just to mention, by the way, I think that Shoshana Zuboff, also one of the students of Daniel Goleman, has written about spiritual intelligence.
Oh, good. Mm-hmm.
So there's some things in there, and also, Daniel Goleman's, Dan Brown's, too many Dans in here. Dan Brown's book, I loved it as well. Although I think he fell a little short on the notions of the brain as purely a receiver. And he always looked at it in very much the sense that we are almost in a predetermined engagement with the field. that it simply informs us rather than being a transceiver where we also read into the world. In any case, wonderful, wonderful book with Dan Brown. But I'll just go through quickly. Yes, what I put there was spirituality is simply all that which brings us into sacred relationship with the world, which is what we're hearing from our wonderful speakers here, right? Both the inner and outer world, right? It means accepting and drawing on information sourced from domains beyond the standard five senses and the technologies that augment them. It does not rely on faith or belief any more than empiricism relies on it. It enriches, augments, and extends empirical understanding. So volunteer work could be spiritual, meditation could be spiritual, taking out the garbage could be spiritual, or none of them could be. It depends on how we engage with reality and where we draw the boundary of legitimate information input and illusionary information input. In essence, it is the embodied and enacted awareness of the interdependence of all things. And it is in this sense that it is a way of sourcing, sensing, and coming into sacred relationship. Sorry, that was a bit long. Share that. Thanks.
That's beautiful and worth saving, Alexander. Thank you so much. Just to let everybody know that if you want to save the chat, and there's just rich resources in the chat, if you go to the chat box, there are 3 dots on my screen. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the chat box. You click on that just before you leave, because it will save it only up to the time that you're leaving. But there is a drop-down box that says Save Chat. And also, we are recording this and we post this on the Edgewalker website. And I also would ask you and Chris to share a little bit. Well, Chris has invited your father, the two of you, to speak to the Management, Spirituality, and Religion group. I think we're hoping it's April. Would you, either of you, say a little bit about that? Chris?
Well, right now we're just down to very practical questions about finding a day and a time that would work. You know, my father's 93 years old, and so he has a short window of time when he's able to speak. But he mentally, he's still very, very much there. And he has a lifetime of researching, writing, and thinking about these things. So I think many people find it interesting because, you know, you have somebody who's written over 100 books and has really thought so deeply about these issues. And this is an opportunity, I think, to not only hear his latest thinking on what's really important, but to ask questions of him.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And for people who don't know, we're talking about Erwin Laszlo and the Laszlo Institute. So thank you so much. That will be very exciting. Questions, comments? Judi, I see you've just put a note in about the nature of the spiritual journey. What would you like to add to that?
If I can get there we go. Can y'all?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. We can see you.
Okay, I just want to say this has really been great, you know, to see the number of people that are here and and of course, when you sit here and listen to it, you can feel the convergence or the sense of wholeness when people, you know, share, and that it's not just one textbook definition, that it is very much an essential aspect of our uniqueness too, even though we can talk about the experience and say, yeah, I had that, you know, and so, but the work we've done on spiritual journey really goes back to the piece I did with Mark Krieger back in 2009 on being-centered leadership and the levels of being that he really developed out of. He and I forget her first name, Singh, developed from the world's wisdom traditions, the five levels of being, and I've really drawn on that, and in a number of ways, especially in my course on leadership formation. The idea of you know, the world basically acts, you know, at the level of human having and human doing. That's it. That's the world's definition of how to be happy. And then, you know, the level of commitment to the spiritual journey through the various practices that have been talked about here today, to go inward, to truly what we call explore our own inward demons or our egoic programs of happiness. And somehow, how can we evacuate those? What does that look like to truly see that true happiness comes from self-transcendence, or loving and serving others and having a sense of purpose, and then the interconnection that's so necessary for that. And that's what we call, that's level 2. And of course, that's the work we've done on spiritual leadership over the years, that to truly be a spiritual leadership, you have to have, you know, it's ontological, that state of being, recognizing that you can be at any state multiple times a day. You know, I can be as spiritual as could be, and then I drive out on I-35 north of Austin, and I'm not so spiritual. My hands, you know, twittering a little bit, and you know, I'm not so spiritual. But these practices that we have to bring us back to center. And then there's a couple of pieces that we published lately, one with Maybu on the concept of pseudo-spiritual leadership and the Buddhist concept of non-self in Journal of Business Ethics. And Stuart Allen and I also did a piece on in the Journal of Business Ethics a couple of years ago on a framework for moral, spiritual, and leader development that draws on that. And Cindy Wigglesworth and I did a piece years ago on spiritual intelligence and how that relates to the levels of being, that was kind of published in a no-name journal that I don't even think exists anymore. But so this whole idea of, and this is part of the problem with other approaches like ethics, you flip, you know, you do a case study and then you flip a switch. You're spiritual, you're ethical. You know, and I was at a retreat, you know, a Harvard retreat north of New York in the Garrison Institute. And Rebecca Henderson from Harvard put that together. And she talked about the book she wrote about reimagining capitalism, setting the world on fire. And she talked about how, you know, she went around and talked to all the CEOs, and they all nodded their heads and they said, absolutely, it really makes sense. And then nothing happened, because thinking will not get you there. Classrooms won't get you there. It's only that inward journey that'll get you there. And you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink. And I spit that water out for a lot of years till I had enough pain where I would look at myself. And I'm certainly no guru by any means, but that's key to, you know, our work in terms of spirituality, that journey, dark nights of the soul that we go through. Anyway, I've talked enough.
Jody's point reflects things that Sandra, Jim, and I all said, you know, that you can't just make a conceptual business case for people.
No.
Yeah, that's what, when I was referring to the business case, the CSR Financial Link research, thousands of studies now, and it hasn't moved the needle at all.
Not at all. No.
My theory of change at the time was, if you show them that doing well makes you earn more money, wow, everybody will change. Well, not so much, right?
That's what I thought too, Sandra.
So you need something else. It needs to be something else. It needs to be
And
a higher.
The answer is spirituality.
Yeah, it needs to be the higher purpose is really, you know, the good of the whole somehow, which we've taken out of the language of economics, and we need to reinsert. The whole point of economics ought to be to create well-being for everyone. Everyone meaning all beings, not just humans.
Yay. Yeah, thank you, Sandra. I'm going to take this moment just to make some announcements and then turn it back to our incredible speakers today. Our next Edgewalker Café is tentatively scheduled for April 16th. If you want to know more about these future cafes, please sign up for our Edgewalker newsletter at edgewalkers.org. And we always post the upcoming cafes on our website. And so we'd love to have you in future cafes. And Sandra, the next one is on spirituality and songwriting.
Ah!
So please come back. And then let's see, anything else I want to say? No, I think that's it for now. I do want to turn it back to Jim and Sandra and Chris for each of you to say one last thing that you would like to leave people with. Oh, and by the way, Jodi, would you please put the Institute's link in the chat so people can find more about your work? And Chris and Sandra, let's see, and Jim, if you have not put links in the chat and you would like people to follow up, put your email or your links there, and we'd love for people to follow up with you. So, thank you.
Can I just say something about songwriting? So I think
Please.
any kind of practice like that gets you into what Csikszentmihalyi calls the state of flow, is basically a spiritual practice. And Judi and I are both songwriters, or at least I used to be. I haven't written much lately, but that is certainly the kind of practice that gets you into that state, and it enables you to channel certain things that you might not otherwise access. So that's my final comment.
Thank you. Your spirit loves to co-create with us through music, through art, through theater, through writing, through business practices, through teaching, through taking out the garbage. Thank you so much, Sandra. Jim or Chris?
Okay. What came up for me very concretely, and it might be fun to play with, is listening to spiritual practices being the key to spirituality. Now I want to play with practices being the key to sustainability. We can start looking at what we're actually doing, every one of us, to try and create a more sustainable world. So thank you, Chris, again. And Sandra, I love the way Sandra can put together a song, as she did in Denver about 15 years ago, when we did breakout groups. And Sandra's breakout group we all had challenges of things to do. Sandra came back with her breakout group, and they sang a song based upon what they had done during the breakout. Chris's last comment, right?
Yeah, Chris?
I turn my time back over to you, Judi.
No, I'm not going to let you do that. Please take us home with some Chris Laszlo wisdom or a request or a sharing of a practice you would invite people to take on, whatever you'd like to do.
Well,
And if you can't pull it together, Chris, maybe Alexandra can do it for us.
Go ahead, Alex.
Here. Only this. Let's I didn't prepare this, but okay. Let's just do this here for a moment, okay?
Perfect.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to ask the panelists if you're able. I know most of you are back-to-back meetings, but if you can stay on just a minute. But we want to say goodbye to everyone else, and we're going to end our recording. Hope to see some of you next month or other places on Zoom or in person. We're all interconnected. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you, Judi, for hosting us.
Yeah.
My great
Bye,
pleasure.
Jim. Bye, Sandra. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.